scream came before I had time to be afraid. I was holding my son when it happened. Finian was warm against my chest, breathing in that small, even way that only sleeping children breathe, his cheek pressed into the wool of my shawl. The morning was gray and quiet. The mist had not lifted from the Shadowpine pass since dawn. The horse's hooves struck the wet stones in a slow, tired rhythm. I had been watching the trees pass and counting them, the way I counted everything now, the silver one, the crooked one, the one with the broken branch, because counting kept my hands from shaking. Then the man at the front of the caravan made a sound I will never forget, and the world turned over. Bandits. The word ran down the line of wagons like fire down a fuse. I pulled Finian to me before I knew I had moved. I slid us both to the floor of the wagon and pressed his small face into the curve of my neck and held him there. "Mama," he whispered. He was awake. Of course he was awake. My brave, clever son had learned long ago not to cry when bad things came. He had learned that in the second town, when the soldiers came at night, and again on the road between the second town and the third, when the man with the limp had followed our cart for a full day before he finally turned back. Finian had been 3 then. He had not made a sound either time. "Don't look, my star," I whispered into his hair. "Don't look. Just stay close to me." I had run for almost 5 years. I had run from a man whose name I would not say even in my own head, because saying it felt like calling him. I had changed towns 4 times. I had cut my hair twice. I had buried my husband's wedding ring in a field outside the village we left first, because I could not bear to wear it anymore, and I could not bear to sell it. I had taught Finian to answer to 3 different names. I had taught him not to ask why. And now, in a wagon on a wet stone road, with the mist breathing around us, I understood that I had not run far enough. A hand pulled the canvas of the wagon back. The man who looked in had a thin face and a smile that did not belong to a smile. He had blood on his sleeve already. His eyes went past me. They did not even see me as a person yet, only as something to be moved out of the way, and they fell on Finian. That was when something inside me broke loose. I have always been a small woman. I am not strong. I am not brave the way the songs mean brave. But there is a thing that lives in a mother that is not in anything else, and when the man's eyes touched my child, that thing came up out of me like a second person. I kicked him in the face. I kicked him so hard the wagon shook. He fell back swearing, and his hand went to his nose, and he laughed, and I knew the laugh was the worst sound I had ever heard. Then he reached for me again. And then the mountain spoke. I do not know how else to say it. The sound that came down from the high pass was not a horn and not a shout and not anything I had a word for. It was the kind of sound you feel before you hear, in the soft, small place at the base of your throat. The trees seemed to listen. The horses, even in their panic, slowed for one heartbeat. The bandit at our wagon went pale. "No," he whispered. "No, not him." Then there were hooves, many hooves, coming fast. I lifted my head just enough to see over the edge of the wagon. Down through the curling mist they came, 6 riders, maybe 7, dressed in dark gray and silver, their cloaks heavy with the wet morning, and at their front, on a black war horse so tall it looked carved out of the night, rode a man whose shoulders were too wide for his cloak, and whose eyes, even at that distance, even through the mist, caught the gray light and burned silver. He did not draw his sword at first. He did not need to. He moved through the bandits the way wind moves through dry grass. I saw a man swing a sword at him, and I saw the sword break. I saw another come at him from the side, and the rider turned without looking, and the man went down. The rider's jaw lengthened, just a little. His hands grew claws, just a little. His shadow on the wet stones was not the shadow of a man. The bandits who could run, ran. The ones who could not, did not. When it was over, the only sounds left in the pass were the heavy breathing of horses and the quiet moan of one wounded driver. The riders fanned out without being told. They moved like men who had done this many times before. The lord of them, for I knew at once that he was a lord, you cannot mistake the way the others stood a pace behind him, slid down from his black horse, and walked toward our wagon with a strange, slow care, as if the road might break under him. He stopped well short of me. He looked down at the stones first. almost like he was making himself smaller before he came any closer. "My lady," he said. His voice was deeper than I expected, and rougher but quieter too. "Are you hurt?" I tried to speak. My throat had closed. I shook my head. "The boy? He is well." The silver eyes moved very briefly to Finian, and then away again, like a man who has been told not to look at a flame too long. There was blood on his cloak. There was a fresh cut along his jaw, dark and clean. He looked tired in a way I recognized, not the tiredness of one bad night, but the tiredness of years. "You can come down," he said. "It is safe now." I climbed down. My legs shook. I hated that they shook. I set Finian carefully on the wet stones and held his small hand tightly, and my son, who had not made a sound through the whole of it, who had pressed his face into my neck without crying, without breathing too loud, looked up. He looked all the way up at the silver-eyed lord with the bloody cloak. He looked at the warriors who stood a step behind him as if afraid to crowd him. He looked at all of that, and his small face went very wide and very still with a kind of wonder I had not seen on him before. "You're the moonwolf," he whispered. Something flickered across the lord's face, something tired, something almost like a wound. He did not answer the boy. He simply nodded once toward the high gray towers I could just see rising above the trees in the distance. "Follow," he said. "You'll be safer with us than out here." Then he turned and walked back to his horse without looking at us again. I stood there a long moment, holding my son's hand, watching the broad back of the man who had just saved our lives. My heart was still beating too fast, but underneath the fear, beneath all the running, all the towns, all the names, I felt something I had not felt in 5 years. I felt that the running—
Garrick, I should not have ridden out that morning. That is the truth, and I will say it before I say anything else. The warning had come from the Eastern Watch the night before, bandits on the lower pass, harassing a southern caravan, and I had told Selwyn to take 6 men down at first light. He was a good captain. He could have managed it without me. I had no business being on a horse less than a week before the moon turned full. But I had not slept. I had not slept properly in 11 nights. The wolf in me had been pacing the inside of my skull since the last quarter, and a long ride in cold air was the only thing that ever quieted it. So I went. I told myself I went because Selwyn might need an extra blade. I knew I went because the tower walls were closing in on me again. What I did not expect when we came down through the mist and the screaming started was the wagon at the back of the line. I have killed men on roads before. I have killed bandits, and I have killed deserters, and once, long ago in a war that no one talks about anymore, I killed 22 men in a single night and could not tell you any of their faces. The wolf in me does not flinch from that work. Neither does the man. But when I came around the broken wagon and saw the woman, something in me went very still. She was small. Her hair had come loose. There was a thin line of blood at the corner of her mouth, and her dress was torn at one shoulder, and she was holding a child against her chest with both arms wrapped around him, as if she meant to grow a second body around his to keep him safe. Her eyes, when she finally lifted them to mine, were grey. Grey like the sky on the morning my mother died. Grey like the stones of a temple I had not entered in 20 years. The wolf in me, the one I had been pacing back and forth with for 11 nights, went quiet. I do not mean it lay down. I mean it stopped. It did the thing it had not done since I was 19 years old, and standing for the first time in my dead father's hall, with all the captains looking at me to see if I would hold the room. It listened. I dismounted. I made myself small. I made my voice as gentle as I knew how to make it, which is not very gentle, but I tried. I asked her if she was hurt. I asked her about the boy. I did not look at the child too long, because I had been told once, by a healer who is now dead, that children read the silver in my eyes faster than anyone else, and I should be careful with them. And then the child looked up at me, and he said the name no one had said to my face in 9 years. Moonwolf. I do not know what was in my face when he said it. Selwyn told me later that I had gone like a man who had just remembered his own door. I did not know what that meant. I still don't. But I know that I could not speak to the boy after he said it. I told them to follow me back to the fortress, and I turned away, and I made it all the way to my horse before the trembling started in my hands. I rode at the front the whole way up. I did not look back. I told myself, the entire long climb, that I would put them in the healing hall, give them work, give them shelter through the winter, and never go down to see them. I told myself that was the only kindness I had to offer. I told myself it was settled. I was wrong about all of it.
Chapter 2. Mira. The fortress of Shadowpine was older than the road that led to it. I learned its shape the way I had learned every new place, slowly, with my son's hand in mine, watching the doors and the windows and the men. The walls were dark stone. The halls were tall. The wind that came through the high windows always smelled faintly of pine and snow, even when the kitchens were baking. The servants moved quietly. The guards did not look at me too long. There was a small, heavy quiet over the whole place, the kind of quiet a house grows around a long, grieving person. We were given a room near the healing halls. It was not grand. The bed was narrow. The floor was cold. But there was a clean blanket folded at the foot of the bed. And someone had left a small clay cup of fresh water on the table, and there was a window that looked out over a courtyard. And the door had a lock. I did not realize until I saw it that I had been waiting 5 years for a door with a lock. I shut it. I turned the iron key. I sat down on the edge of the narrow bed, and I cried so hard that Finian climbed onto my lap and patted my cheek with his small warm hand and told me not to. "Don't cry, Mama. This place is good. How do you know, my star? Because the moonwolf lives here." He said it the way children say true things, with no doubt at all. And he doesn't let bad things in. I laughed, even through the tears, and pulled him against me. And I did not have the heart to tell him that I had thought every place was good in the first week, and every place had been wrong by the second month. The next morning I was given work. The head healer was a small old woman called Elspeth. She wore 3 shawls at once and spoke to her dried plants more than she spoke to people. She looked me up and down once with her sharp, pale eyes. She asked me if I could clean a wound. I said yes. She asked me if I could brew a fever tea. I said yes. She made a small grunting sound that I learned eventually meant good enough, and she handed me an apron. I learned the shelves, I learned the herbs, I learned which jars held which dried things. I kept my hands busy and my ears open because that was how a woman like me learned what kind of place she had walked into. The healers talked, the way healers always do. "He hasn't come down in weeks, you know," one of them said one afternoon, while I ground a root into paste at the back of the hall. She was speaking to another woman. She did not know I could hear. "Not since the last full moon." "What happened at the last full moon?" the second one asked. There was a pause. The grinding stopped for a moment. "You know what happened." "I don't, actually. I only came here in the spring." Another pause, longer. "There were 3 poachers," the first one said at last, very low. "Up on the high ridge. They had brought a wolf trap. A real one, silver teeth, the kind you only use on our kind. He came out of the tower that night because he heard the trap close on a young one. By the time he found them, the young one was dead. They say he killed them with his hands, all 3, and he did not remember it the next morning. Old Elspeth had to tell him what he had done. He did not come down from the tower for 41 days. By the mother. That is why he keeps his distance now, the first one whispered. And it is better that way. For him, for everyone. Then they noticed me at the back of the hall, and the conversation stopped, and the second healer said something loud about lavender, and I kept grinding the root as if I had heard nothing at all. I did not lift my head, but the words sat in my mind for the rest of the afternoon. He did not remember it the next morning. 41 days. I thought of the silver-eyed lord on the mountain road, the way he had looked down at the stones before he came any closer to my wagon, the way his own warriors had stood a pace behind him. I did not think I was afraid of him. I thought instead that he was afraid of himself. And I knew, because I was a woman who had been afraid of herself once after Finian's father died and I had drunk too much wine for a winter, that there is no fear lonelier in the world. That night, after I had put Finian to bed and was sitting by the small window of our room, watching the moon climb over the eastern peaks, I heard my son speak softly behind me. "Mama?" "Yes, my star." "The moon wolf is sad." I turned. He was sitting up in the bed, his small face serious. "Why do you say that?" "Because his tower is dark." Finian pointed out the window, past the courtyard, up to the high stone tower at the far end of the fortress. There was no light in any of its windows. Sad people don't light candles. I looked at the dark tower. I looked at my son. I did not know what to say. I tucked him in. I kissed his forehead. I thought he had fallen asleep. I was wrong about that, too. 3 nights later, the moon was full. I did not know it at the time, but Finian had been planning. He had been hiding things under his pillow for 2 days. A small clay cup he had stolen from the kitchens, a square of healer's paper, a bit of charcoal from the fire, and he had been listening for the sound of my breathing slowing in the bed beside him. He told me all of this later, when there was nothing left to confess. At the time, I knew only that I woke up at the very darkest hour of the night and reached for him in the bed and found nothing there but a cooling place in the blanket. I have known fear before. The fear that came up in me in that moment was an older fear than any of them. I was out of the bed in one motion. I did not even put on my shoes. I went out into the corridor with my hair loose and the cold stone shocking my feet, and I called his name as quietly as I could, because some part of me, even in that fear, still remembered that I was a woman who must not be heard. I was halfway down the hall before I saw the small bare footprints in the dust, going the wrong way. Going up, toward the tower, I followed them. I followed them up the long, winding tower stairs, around and around, my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my teeth. There were no guards. I noticed that even then, even in the middle of the worst fear of my life, there were no guards on the stairs, not one. The moon wolf had dismissed them. The moon wolf had wanted to be let alone. And my 5-year-old son, in his nightshirt, had walked up these stairs without being stopped by anyone at all. I came around the last turn of the stairwell and I almost cried out. Finian was sitting on the stone floor outside the tower door, his back against the wall, his small bare feet tucked under him, sound asleep with his cheek resting on his own arm. There was a basket beside him. The basket held a clay cup, a small folded square of paper, and a drawing. A smiling round moon with eyes and a tiny mouth done in clumsy charcoal lines. I went to him on my knees. I gathered him into my arms. I pressed my face into his hair, and I did not know whether I was going to weep or shake him or laugh. I did all 3, very quietly on the stone floor outside the Lord's door. "My star," I whispered. "Oh, my star, what have you done?" He stirred. He looked up at me with the slow blinking face of a child who has been somewhere very far away in his sleep. "I left him a present," he murmured. "He's sad." I looked at the heavy wooden door. I looked at the basket. I looked at my son, half asleep against my shoulder, with his charcoal-stained fingers and his small, clean conscience. I almost picked up the basket and carried it back down with us. I almost did. I had practiced, for 5 years, the small art of leaving no trace, of slipping out of inns before the sun came up, of not letting the baker remember my face, of teaching my son to say less than he wanted to say. The basket on the floor was a trace, a child-shaped trace with my son's name on the note in his shaky letters. I almost picked it up, but Finian's small head was heavy on my shoulder, and his charcoal-stained fingers were curled into the front of my nightdress, and I thought of the dark tower with no candles, and I thought of 3 poachers and 41 days, and I thought, what is one more trace in one more place? I left the basket. I carried my son back down the stairs. At the bottom of the tower, on the very last step, I paused. I turned my head and looked back up the long, winding dark. I do not know what made me do it. I am not a praying woman. I have not been a praying woman since my husband died. But I stood there a moment, with my son sleeping against my shoulder, and I said very quietly to the dark stone above me, "Be gentle with him. He did not mean any harm." Then I carried Finian back to bed.
Garrick, I almost stepped on the cup. That is the truth. The morning after the full moon, I came to the door of my chamber to call for Bren, my manservant. There was a stiffness in my back from sitting at the open shutter all night, and I needed water, and I needed bread, and I needed to feel that the world had not ended again. And my boot came down on the stone outside the door and stopped a hair short of a small clay cup. I stood very still for a long time. There was a folded square of paper. There was a drawing of the moon, done in a child's hand with a smile on her round white face. There was the cup itself, which had once been warm, and which still smelled faintly of honey and chamomile. The tea inside had gone cold a long time ago. I picked up the note. My hands were too large for the paper. I had to hold it carefully so as not to tear it. I read the wobbly letters slowly, twice, because I did not believe them the first time. Dear Moonwolf, drink this. It makes bad feelings go away. From Finian. I stood in the doorway of my tower with the cold morning air on my face, and I felt something inside my chest that I had not felt in a very long time. I did not know what to call it. I had forgotten the name of it. I will tell you what was true about that morning, because there is no point in pretending otherwise. I was 43 years old. I had ruled the fortress of Shadowpine for 11 of those years, after my father's heart gave out on a cold spring day. I had killed in war. I had killed in peace. I had killed, with my own hands and without remembering, 3 men on a high ridge 9 months before, for a crime they had committed against my own kind. I was the lord of a stone fortress on a cold mountain, and I had decided a long time ago that no one would ever again leave me a small kind thing without it costing them something. That had been the bargain I had made. Not with a god, with myself. You will not be loved. You will not be touched. You will not be visited in your tower with cups of warm tea. In return, you will not lose another person to the wolf in your blood. I had kept that bargain for 9 years. A small boy I did not know had broken it in a single night. I carried the basket inside. I set it on my table. I did not drink the tea. It was long cold, and even if it had not been, I did not yet trust my hands not to crush the cup. I sat down across from it, in the chair by the window, and I looked at the small charcoal moon for a long time. I thought of the woman in the wagon. The grey eyes, the torn shoulder, the way her arms had wrapped around the boy. I thought, she is the mother of a child who is not afraid of me. And then a worse thought, a more dangerous thought. The thought I had not let myself have in 9 years. What kind of woman raises a child like that? I went down from the tower that afternoon. I had not gone down in the daytime in 11 days. The healers in the hall went very still when I walked in, the way deer go still when a larger animal moves through the trees. I nodded once to Elspeth, who nodded back without surprise, as if she had been expecting me. I went to the back of the hall, where the widow was kneeling beside a low table, sorting bundles of dried thyme. She felt me before she saw me. The room had changed temperature. She looked up. Her hair was tied back. There was a smudge of something green on her cheek. Her sleeves were pushed up to her elbows. Her eyes, those terrible grey eyes, went a little wider when she saw me, and she got up too quickly, and she brushed at her apron, and she could not seem to find her hands. My lord, Lady Mira. I had not known until I said it that I knew her name. Elspeth must have told me, or one of the captains. I did not remember asking. I held the folded note up between 2 of my fingers. I had been holding it all the way down the tower stairs. You have a very brave son, I said. The words came out lower than I had meant them to. I cleared my throat. Her face went the most extraordinary colour. Oh, my lord, I am so sorry. He sneaks. He is too curious for his own good. I will speak to him. He didn't bother me. Something in her face changed when I said it. The polite mask she had brought up came down a little. I saw for the first time the woman underneath it, the one who had not slept properly in a long time, the one who was tired in the same old way I was tired, the one who had grey eyes the colour of the sky on the morning my mother died. I did not know what to do with my hands. I looked at the note instead. It has been a long time, I said quietly, since anyone left me kindness. I had not meant to say it. The words came out before I knew they were going to. They were the simplest thing I had ever said to anyone in that hall, and they hung between us in the herb-scented air with no place to go. Her face moved. I looked away. I could not bear to see what was moving in it. I looked at the door instead. "I should not keep you from your work." "My lord," but I was already turning. I stopped at the door with one hand on the frame. I did not look back. I spoke to the doorway. "Tell him," I said. "Tell the boy. The tea worked." Then I went back up the stairs. I did not eat that evening. I sat at the open shutter and I watched the moon wane, and I thought of the green smudge on the woman's cheek, and I thought, this is dangerous. This is exactly the kind of dangerous thing you swore you would never let through the door again. But that night, for the first time in 9 years, I lit a candle in the high window.
Mira, I did not let myself hope. That is the first thing I want to say about the days that followed. I had hoped before. I had hoped in the second town, when the baker was kind to Finian. I had hoped in the third town, when the innkeeper's wife had taken us in for a winter without asking too many questions. I had hoped, every time, and every time the world had reached out a long, thin hand and tapped me on the shoulder and reminded me that I was still being followed. So when the moonwolf began coming down from his tower in the late afternoons, I did not let myself hope. I let myself notice. That is a different thing. I noticed the way old Elspeth's mouth twitched at the corners on the days he came. I noticed the way the younger healers stood up straighter and then, slowly, stopped standing up straighter, as if they had begun to learn that he did not require it. I noticed that the kitchen began sending up better bread. I noticed that the red-haired guard at the inner gate had taken to bowing to Finian when we passed him in the morning, and that Finian, who had learned, in the long bad years, to make himself small in front of men in uniforms, had begun to lift his small chin and bow back. The fortress was breathing differently, as if something at the top of it had loosened. I did not let myself hope, but I noticed. The moonwolf, Lord Garrick, I had begun to call him in my head, although I still said my lord with my mouth, never came too close to me. He stood in the doorway of the hall. He spoke quietly to Elspeth. His silver eyes would find me somewhere in the room, and they would stay on me one heartbeat longer than they needed to before moving on. He never crossed the floor to the workbench where I was. He did not stand within arm's reach. I understood somehow that he was being careful, not careful of me, careful around me, as if I were a thing he was afraid to break by standing too near. I told myself the carefulness was kindness, and I was right. I did not let myself notice until much later that the carefulness was also longing. One evening, about a week after the morning of the cold tea, he came in carrying a small bundle wrapped in dark cloth. The hall had emptied. Old Elspeth had gone home. Finian was sitting on the floor near the fire, drawing on a scrap of paper, his tongue poking out one corner of his mouth in concentration. I was the only one still working, sorting the day's last bundles of dried mint into the long, shallow drawers. Garrick stopped in the doorway. "Am I disturbing you?" "No, my lord." He came in slowly. He walked the way a large man walks in a small room, careful of his shoulders, careful of everything around him. He set the bundle on the workbench beside me and unfolded the dark cloth with surprisingly gentle fingers. Inside were stems of a herb I did not know. The leaves were silver gray. They smelled faintly of pepper and snow. "For your work," he said. The gruffness was back in his voice, the way it always was when he was uncertain. "It only grows on the high passes. Elspeth used to ask me to bring it down before." He stopped himself. I did not press him. I had learned not to press him. "Thank you, my lord." I reached for the bundle. Our fingers brushed. It was the smallest touch. The side of his hand against the side of mine, less than a touch, a graze. But I felt it down to the bones of my wrist, and I felt it in the place at the small of my back where my husband used to put his hand when we walked into a room together, and I felt it somewhere lower than that, somewhere I had not let myself feel in 5 years, and had told myself was dead. He pulled back almost too quickly. So did I. We did not look at each other for a moment. When I did look up, his silver eyes were not silver. They had gone a little darker, almost gray, almost the color of mine. He was looking at the hand I had pulled back, as if he were memorizing the small curve where my fingers met my palm. I felt my face go warm. He turned his head sharply away. Then Finian stood up, and the moment broke gently, the way good moments and dangerous moments both break at the small voice of a child. "My lord," Finian said. Garrick looked down at him. Whatever stiffness had been in his shoulders eased a little. "Yes, little one. Why do you stay in the tower when the moon is so pretty?" The question landed like a feather. Garrick blinked. "Don't you want to walk with Mama?" Finian went on. "She likes walking under the moon. She told me she did once when we lived by the river. Before." "Finian Anders Belair," I said in my head, using all three of his names, which I had only ever done once before in my life, when he was 3 and had eaten a candle. "Finian," I said out loud, in the strangled tone that means we will discuss this later. But he only looked up at me and then back at Garrick, with the deep, unbothered confidence of a child who knows he has said something true. Garrick cleared his throat. He cleared it again. The corner of his mouth was doing something odd, something that wanted very badly to be a smile and was not quite allowed to be one. He began, and stopped. "I have not." He looked at me. Whatever he saw in my face seemed to decide him. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "one night I could join you both, if your mother does not mind." I opened my mouth. I closed it. I opened it again. I should have said no. There was a clear voice in the back of my mind that knew exactly what no would do, and the voice had been keeping me alive for 5 years, and the voice had never, ever been wrong. The voice said no. My mouth said, I would not mind. That night the moon rose round and pale over the eastern peaks, and the 3 of us walked together in the fortress garden. It was not much of a garden. The earth was hard, the flowers were stubborn, but there were stone paths and a small dry fountain that had not run in years, and an old apple tree that still gave fruit in autumn, and the moonlight made everything silver. The air smelled of rosemary and frost. Finian skipped ahead almost at once. He had no fear in him at all. He pointed at stars and named the ones he had given names to himself. "That one is Bright Tom. That one is Lady Sleepy. That big one over there is the captain." And he laughed at his own jokes and turned in slow circles with his arms out, just to feel the moonlight on his palms. I walked behind him. Garrick walked beside me. There was always a careful arm's length of cold air between us. I was the one who broke the silence in the end. He would not have. I knew even then that he would not have. He would have walked the whole length of the garden 3 paces from me and never said a word, because he was a man who had taught himself to keep what he wanted on a shelf above his own head. "They told me," I said quietly, looking ahead at my son, "about the poachers." He went so still beside me that for a moment I thought I had killed something between us with the words. "They should not have," he said at last. "They did not mean me to hear. I overheard. It is the same." The wind moved through the apple tree above us, and a few of its last dry leaves came down between our feet. "I do not tell you," I said, "to make you say anything. I tell you because I do not want it to live between us as a thing I do not know." He was silent a long time. "They had a wolf trap," he said finally. He did not look at me. He looked at the dark line of the eastern peaks, silver-toothed, the kind they only make to hunt our kind. There was a young one in our pack, 14 years old. He had wandered too far from the house. The trap took his foot. By the time I got there, he had bled too much. I held him while he died. He was a friend's son. I have known him since he could not speak. He stopped. His jaw worked. "I tell you what I know to be true," he said. "I do not know what I did to the men who set the trap. I went after them. I came back at dawn with their blood on my hands and on my mouth, and the captains looked at me and would not tell me what I had done. Old Elspeth told me, eventually. She does not lie. There were 3 of them. She told me what I had done to them, and when she was finished telling me, I went up to the tower, and I did not come down for 41 days. The wind moved. "That is what is in me, Mira," he said. He still would not look at me. His voice was very low and very flat, as if he had practiced not letting it crack. "When the moon is high and someone hurts what I love, that is what comes out. It does not ask my permission. It does not stop at 3. I do not know if there is a number it would stop at. I have not tested it." I understood then what he was doing. He was telling me the worst thing about himself first. He was setting it on the path between us so that I could not later say I had not been warned. I had been a married woman. I had loved a man for 7 years. I knew the look of a man who was trying to make himself easy to leave. I stopped walking. He took 2 more steps before he realized I had stopped. He turned. The moon was bright behind him, and his silver eyes caught the light, and for a moment he did not look like a man at all. He looked like something the night itself had grown carefully around the bones of, slow and patient, over many years. "Garrick," I said. I had not used his name out loud before. Not to his face. He closed his eyes for a moment when I said it, as if it hurt him, as if it healed him. "My husband died," I said quietly, "of a fever. He was a good man. He was kind. He never raised his hand to me or to any other living creature. I loved him very much." "Mira, let me finish. After he died, his cousin came to the house. The cousin was not a kind man. He thought I should marry him. I would not. He told the village I had killed my husband. The village believed him for 1 season. I left in the middle of a night with my son on my hip and a single bag, and I have been moving ever since." I made myself look up at him. Properly, all the way up. "I have been hunted by a man called Lord Draven for almost 5 years," I said. "I do not know why he chose me. I will not pretend to know. He has put men on roads to find me. He has paid coin in 3 towns for my whereabouts. He has—" I stopped. I made myself say it. "There was a girl who looked like me, in the 3rd town. He took her. By the time he learned she was not me, she was not anything anymore." Garrick made a small, low sound in the back of his throat. It was not a word. It was not anything language had a name for. It was the sound a wolf makes when something has hurt one of his. "I tell you," I said, "because I do not want it to live between us as a thing you do not know. You have killed 3 men in a single night. I have buried a husband and lost a girl who looked like me. We are neither of us simple, Garrick. I am not asking you to be simple. I am asking you to walk with me in the garden. That is what I am asking." He did not speak. He took 1 step closer, then another. When he was within arm's reach of me, he stopped. He lifted 1 hand. He did not touch my face. He held his hand a little away from my cheek, and his silver eyes searched mine, and I understood that he was asking permission with his hand still in the air. I did not move away. He tucked a loose strand of my hair behind my ear. His fingers were rough at the edges and very, very gentle at the center. They lingered for 1 second at my jaw, only 1, and then they fell away. His thumb brushed, almost without meaning to, the corner of my mouth. My breath caught. "You make me wish," he said low, "that I was less cursed. Garrick." I had said his name twice in 1 night. I had not said any man's name twice in 1 night for 5 years. He bent his head. I thought, for 1 wild, bright second, that he was going to kiss me, and I felt my hands come up to the front of his coat without my permission and rest there flat against the wool, and I felt his breath warm on my mouth, and I closed my eyes. He kissed my forehead. Just my forehead. Slow and long, his lips warm against the place where my hair met my skin, his hands still cradling the side of my face. He stayed there a moment, breathing me in, as if memorizing something. I felt the tremble in his shoulders. I felt my own answer it. When he pulled back, he was a careful inch away from my mouth. His silver eyes were dark again. "Not yet," he murmured. "Not until you know me better. You should be sure." "I am sure." "Be more sure." He stepped back. He had to make himself do it. I saw the cost of it on his face. The hand he had used to touch my hair was shaking very slightly when he let it fall to his side. Behind us, on the path, Finian called, "Mama, look! Look, the captain has a brother now!" And I laughed, because I could do nothing else. And Garrick laughed too, low and rough. And the moment closed with us still standing too close to each other on a stone path under a high white moon. I lay awake a long time that night. Finian slept curled against my side, his small breath warm on my shoulder. The window was open a crack. The moon hung in it like a coin pinned to dark cloth, and I watched it for an hour without blinking. I thought about the way Garrick had held his hand near my face before he touched me. I thought about the man in the second town who had not asked. I thought about the man in the fourth town who had not asked. I thought about the way Lord Draven had looked at me once across a market square, and the way my whole body had gone cold from the throat down. Garrick had asked. Garrick had asked with his hand in the air. He had also told me calmly and clearly that the wolf in him had killed 3 men in a single night, and that he did not know what number it would stop at. I should have been afraid. I waited to be afraid. Instead, I lay in the dark with my son's small breath on my shoulder, and I thought of his rough fingers gentle at my jaw, and I thought, that is a man who knows what is in him and will not let it touch me. I thought, that is the safest place I have stood in 5 years. And then I thought, with a clear small voice that had been keeping me alive, that is exactly what you thought about the second town, and the third, and the fourth. I closed my eyes. I did not sleep for a long time.
Chapter 4. Garrick? Finian's secret missions did not stop. If anything, they grew bolder. The morning after the night in the garden, I found a second drawing under the small stone outside my door. He had used a whole sheet of healer's paper this time, and he had used 3 of his precious colours. There is a rationing of colour in a child's life, and 3 at once is a confession of love. There was a wolf in the middle of the drawing, drawn in dark grey, with 2 large ears and a sweet square smile. To one side stood a lady in a long blue dress. To the other side stood a small boy. The boy was holding the lady's hand with one hand. With the other he was holding the wolf's paw. 2 nights later I found a sprig of lavender tied with a piece of pale string. The note tucked under it said, in his wobbly hand, "Because it smells nice when you feel sad." The night after that, a smooth river stone. He did not write a note for the stone. He thought the stone explained itself. I had not in those days told the cook to take the basket away. I had told him to leave it. I had told myself it was for the child's pride, that if the basket disappeared, the child would think I had not seen it, and the child should not think that. The truth was something else. The truth was that I went out at dawn each morning before Bren came up with my water, and I knelt down on the stone, I, the Lord of Shadowpine, on one knee on cold stone in my sleep clothes, and I picked up whatever the boy had left, and I took it inside, and I put it on the table beside the cup. I had a small shelf of his offerings now, the drawings, the lavender, the river stone, the first cup washed clean and kept. I had stood in front of the shelf one morning, in the grey light, and I had thought, this is a man's shrine, and the saint is 5 years old. I had not slept properly in 9 days. The wolf in me was not pacing. The wolf in me was sitting quietly in the back of my mind, watching the door of the tower with a kind of patient hunger I had never felt from it before. The wolf in me had decided something. The wolf in me had decided a great deal. The man was not yet ready to admit what. On the 18th night after the morning of the cold tea, I caught the boy on the stairs. I had not meant to. I had heard the small bare feet on the stone. The boy was an excellent sneak for his age, but I am a man whose ears were not entirely a man's ears any more. And I had come out onto the landing with a single candle to see what the world was sending me this time. He was halfway down the tower stairs. He froze when he heard me, with one small bare foot still in the air over the next step. He turned around very slowly, the way children turn when they know they have been caught, and are still hoping to charm their way out of it. "Hello, Moonwolf," he said politely. I came down 2 steps. Then I stopped. Then I did something I had not done in many years. I sat down on the stairs. I lowered myself in stages, my great frame folding so that I was almost at the same height as the boy 2 steps below me. My knees creaked. The candle made a small island of light around us both. "Why?" I said, very low and very gentle. "Do you keep coming up here, little one?" He thought about it. He took the question seriously. He always took the question seriously. That was the strange thing about him. There was not a child's quickness in his answers. There was a child's care. "Because your wolf looks lonely," he said. The breath went out of me as if something had pressed gently on my chest. "And," he added, working it out as he went, I think you would make my mama smile bigger. She used to smile a lot. She doesn't anymore. Not the big smiles, only small ones. She thinks I don't know the difference. But I do. I had to look down at the candle. I did not trust my own face. When I had control of it again, I asked him a question I had been wanting to ask for 2 weeks. "Little one, how do you know so much about the moon?" He shrugged. The shrug was a child's shrug. The answer was not. "I always watched her," he said. "When we lived in the second town, Mama and I had to be very quiet at night because the man with the cane lived under us, so we couldn't talk. So I just looked out the window. The moon was always there. She didn't make any sound. She was a good friend to be quiet with." He paused. He frowned, working further back. "And in the third town we had to leave fast, and we slept in the cart for 2 weeks. The moon was the only thing the same in every place. So I learned her. She gets a tiny bit bigger, and then a tiny bit smaller, and she goes red sometimes when she is the very biggest, and she goes away sometimes, and that is when bad things happen because there is no one watching." He looked up at me. His small face was very serious in the candle light. "I started watching for her when she went away," he said, "so she'd have someone too." I did not know what to say. I thought of the Lord I had been before. The Lord who had told himself for 9 years that the most dangerous thing in his stone tower was the wolf in his blood. I thought, no. The most dangerous thing in this tower right now is a 5-year-old who has been keeping the moon company since he was small enough to fit in a cart. I reached out one large hand. I placed it, very carefully, on top of his small head. I did not ruffle the hair. I just rested it there, the way a man rests his hand on something he is afraid to break. "You are a good son, Finian," I said. "Thank you, Moonwolf. And little one. Yes. Stop coming up the stairs alone in the dark. You will fall." "Okay." "I mean it." "Okay, Moonwolf." I walked him back to his mother's door myself. I did not go inside. I waited in the corridor until I heard him climb back into the bed and pull the blanket up. Then I went back up my tower with the empty candle. I sat at the open shutter for a long time. The moon was down to its last quarter. I felt the wolf in me, sitting quietly at the back of my mind, watching the door. I knew by then what the wolf had decided. I was not sure yet whether the man would have the courage to agree with him.
Mira, he invited me up to the tower the next day. The message came through old Elspeth, who delivered it without expression, a short note in a small, precise hand. "If you would care to see the view before the dark comes, the balcony of the high tower is yours this evening. Bring the boy." I read it twice. I read it 3 times. I read it as if the second and third readings might tell me something the first one had not. Elspeth, without looking up from her sage, made a small sound in her throat. It was not quite a chuckle. It was the older sister of a chuckle. "You'll wear the blue, dear," she said. "Elspeth, you'll wear the blue." I wore the blue. I do not have many dresses. The blue one had a small mend at the cuff, but the color was good against my dark hair, and Finian had drawn me in it. I brushed my hair longer than I needed to. I told myself it was for no reason at all. I told myself also that the small heat I felt in my throat as I climbed the stairs was only the climbing. Finian wore his cleanest tunic and almost tripped twice on the way up. The stairs that had felt forever long in the dark felt half as long in the late afternoon light. There were narrow windows every so often, and we passed through pools of warm gold, and Finian named each pool as we went. "That one is honey, that one is toast, that one is soup." I laughed. I was a woman who had not let herself laugh out loud in a long time, and I laughed twice on those stairs. Garrick was waiting at the top. He had taken some care. I saw it at once. He was dressed plainly, a dark tunic, a leather belt, no armor, no cloak. But his hair was pulled back, and he had shaved the line of his jaw clean, and the cut from the road had healed to a thin, pale line. He looked, for the first time since I had met him, as if his body were not a thing he was carrying around against his will. "My lady," he said, "my lord, will you come out?" The balcony was wide and open and breathtaking. It looked east, over the long fall of the mountains, all the way to the distant lowlands. The sun was setting somewhere behind us, out of sight, but its light came around the edge of the world and turned everything pink and gold and lavender. The sky was already dark blue at the top. The first stars were showing. Finian made a small sound of pure delight and ran straight at the railing. Garrick was beside him in an instant. I had not seen him move, he simply was, and he had his hand on the boy's shoulder and was lifting a sturdy wooden bench so that Finian could stand on it safely and still see over. "Easy, little one. Stay back from the edge. Here. Better?" "Better." Garrick stood by him a moment longer with one large hand resting lightly on his shoulder just to be sure. Then he turned to me. "Walk with me?" There was a wider end of the balcony away from the railing. We went there. The wind was soft. The mountains turned dark in front of us, peak by peak, as the light left. "You have raised a remarkable child," he said quietly. "He is the best of me, and of his father who is gone. We were quarry. Thank you." We were quiet for a moment. The sky deepened. A single bright star came out where the moon would later rise. I drew a breath. "He loves you already," I said. "He talks about you every day, your cloak, your eyes, how big your hands are. He thinks you can fix anything." I paused. The next words were harder. I said them anyway because they were true, and I think I am starting to as well. Garrick stood very still. He did not look at me at first. He looked out at the mountains, at the last colors going out of the sky. I could see the line of his jaw and the slow rise and fall of his breath, and a small tightness around his eyes that was not pain, was not exactly pain. When he turned to me, his silver eyes had something in them I had not seen before. Not in him, not in anyone. He stepped close. I should say, I want to be honest about this, that I felt the old voice in the back of my mind start up again. The voice that had been keeping me alive for 5 years. The voice said, step back now, you do not know him. You think you do. You think you do. You did not know any of the others either." I felt my body lean toward stepping back. I felt my weight shift onto my heel. The voice said, "Go. Make an excuse. Take Finian and go." I made myself stay. I made myself stay because Garrick had stopped a careful arm's length from me again. Because his hands were at his sides. Because his silver eyes were searching mine for a no. And I knew that the smallest no from me would have ended it. Would have ended the balcony, the evening, the entire gentle, terrifying thing growing between us, and would have ended it without him ever once asking me why. I made myself stay. I lifted my face. He read it. He read it the way he read me now. Quickly, completely, without flinching from any of it. And he closed the small distance between us in one slow step. He cupped my face in both his hands. His palms were so much warmer than the air. They were rough at the edges and soft at the centers, and they framed my face the way a man frames a thing he is going to look at for a long time. His thumbs moved, just once, along the line of my cheekbones. I closed my eyes. He kissed me. On the mouth, this time. Not on the forehead. He kissed me carefully at first, the way he did everything carefully. His lips warm and dry and slow against mine, testing, not taking, asking. I made a small sound I had not meant to make, in the back of my throat, and his breath caught against my mouth and the kiss changed. He did not crowd me. He did not press me back against anything. He stayed exactly where he was. But the kiss deepened, slow and deep and careful, and one of his rough hands slid back into my hair at the nape of my neck, and the other moved down to the side of my throat and settled there, his thumb at the hollow under my jaw, feeling my pulse. I felt him feel it. I felt him feel how fast it was. I felt him slow even further when he did, as if he were holding something fragile and was determined not to break it. I had not been kissed in 5 years. I had not been kissed like this, like a thing that mattered, like a thing a man would take his time over, like a thing whose pulse a man wanted to count under his thumb, perhaps ever. My hands had come up without my permission. They were on the front of his tunic. They had fistfuls of the wool. I was holding on to him the way a woman holds on to a railing in a high place. He felt that too, I think. His mouth softened. He pulled back the smallest distance, only enough to breathe, and rested his forehead against mine. "Mira." "Yes. Tell me to stop. Don't stop. Mira. Don't stop." He kissed me again, once. Slow. Deep enough to make my knees go soft. Then he pulled back, properly back, and kept his hands on my face a moment longer, breathing against my hair. "Then I will not," he said. "But I will be slow, Mira. I am going to be very slow. I'm going to be slower than you want me to be, because you are not a thing I am going to mishandle. Do you hear me?" I nodded against his hand. Yes. Behind us, on his bench, Finian was watching the first proper star of the evening with both small hands on the railing. He had not turned around once. I learned much later that he had heard us. Of course he had. He had simply decided, with the great kindness of a 5-year-old, that it was none of his business. He turned around now, with the patience of a child who has been counting in his head, and he beamed at us. "The sky is doing the pink thing," he announced. Garrick let out a soft, rough laugh against my temple. He did not let go of me. He kept one arm low around my waist and turned us both toward the boy. "So it is, little one," he said. "So it is." Chapter 5. Mira. The week that followed was the gentlest week of my life. I do not say that lightly. I have had sweet days. I had a wedding day. I had the day Finian was born. 18 hours of pain and one small wet cry, and then the whole rest of the world suddenly made sense. I have had spring mornings by a river when I was 19 and had not yet learned that the world contained men like Lord Draven. But that week, that one quiet week between the kiss on the balcony and the horn from the Eastern Watch, was the gentlest stretch of days I have ever known. Garrick took meals in the small hall now. 3 nights, then 4, then every night. He sat across from Finian and learned the names of the stars from him in the proper order: Bright Tom, Lady Sleepy, the captain's brother. He ate the soup that was put in front of him. He laughed once, twice, 3 times. Small, rough laughs, the laugh of a man who has not used the muscle in a long time and is pleased to find it still works. He did not kiss me again in front of anyone. He kissed me other places. In the doorway of the herb cupboard, when I had gone to fetch a jar I did not really need. In the corridor outside the small hall after supper, in the shadow of a tapestry, his hand at the small of my back and his mouth slow and sure on mine. Once, very briefly, in the corner of the inner courtyard at dusk, when there was no one watching but a single gray cat. Each kiss was the same kiss, slow, deep, careful in a way that was not careful of me. He had stopped being careful of me, but careful of the moment, careful of the time. A man taking care that he did not rush a thing he meant to make last. I moved one small bag of my things into his tower. He had said, very seriously, "Take whatever time you need," and I had taken him at his word. Just one bag, just my hairbrush, my comb, the blue dress with the mended cuff. A second bag the next day, the small carved bird Finian's father had whittled for him before he died. By the end of the week, the tower had 2 of my dresses in the wardrobe and a small jar of dried mint on the table, and I would walk past the door of my old room near the healing hall and feel almost a stranger to it. Finian got a room of his own in the tower. He was very pleased about this for one whole afternoon, and then he came to us at supper that night with his small chin set and his small mouth firm, and he said, "I think the small bed is for guests and for daytime." Garrick had been lifting a piece of bread to his mouth. He stopped. He looked at the boy. He looked at me. The corner of his mouth did the small thing it now did almost every evening, the thing that wanted to be a smile and now mostly was one. "Then where will you sleep, little one?" he asked very gravely. "With you and Mama, so you don't get sad in the night." Garrick set down his bread. "Of course," he said. That night, Finian climbed into the big bed in the tower chamber by himself, and made himself a small, confident place between us, and went to sleep with one small hand on my arm and the other on Garrick's. Garrick lay very still for a long time after the boy's breathing slowed. I could see his silver eyes open in the dark, watching the ceiling. I reached across our son's small head and laid my fingers very lightly on the back of his hand, and he turned his hand over without taking his eyes from the ceiling and laced his fingers through mine. "I do not know what to do with this," he whispered. "With what?" "With being given a family." I held his hand a little tighter. "You don't have to know yet," I whispered. "We will teach you." He made a small, low sound. He brought our joined hands up and pressed the back of mine briefly to his mouth. Then he set them down on the blanket between us and our son and did not let go. I slept that night the way I had not slept in 5 years. The horn from the Eastern Watch woke us 4 mornings later. Mira, the 2 days before the blood moon, were the...
Garrick. The watchman's horn never sounds for one rider. That was the first thing I knew. The second was that the morning was wrong. Too still, no birds, the kind of grey that comes down out of the high passes when something is moving through them. By the time I was on the wall, Selwyn was already there, with his old scarred hand braced on the parapet and his eyes narrowed at the lower road. "How many?" I asked. 20 so far," he said. "There will be more." There were more. By mid-morning we had counted 120. By noon, 200. By the time the sun touched the western peaks, an army was making camp on the lower slope of our mountain. Their banners were dark red and black. Their tents were going up in the careful, ugly precision of men who had done this work many times before. At the front of them, on a tall white horse, sat a man in fine armour with a thin, cruel face. And even at that distance I could feel the wolf in me settle low and hot in my chest, the way it does when a thing it does not like has come within reach. I knew before any messenger came up the mountain. Of course I knew. Mira had told me his name on the balcony 3 weeks ago. I had known, the moment she said it, that he would come. I had known it in the small, specific way a man knows when his own door has been marked. I had simply not known when. I had been planning. I had not told her that was the small, ugly thing I had to live with on the wall that morning, that I had spent every night of the past 3 weeks thinking about Lord Draven, and I had said nothing to her, because I had not wanted to be the man who put fear back into her face after she had finally laid it down. I had told myself that was kindness. I knew on the wall that it had also been cowardice. I sent for her. She came up the wall faster than I had expected. Her hair was loose. Her sleeves were pushed up to her elbows from the morning's work in the hall. Her eyes, the grey eyes that had stopped the wolf in me on a misty road, went past me to the slope below, and I saw her face change, and I saw her hands come up to the parapet, and I saw her whole body go very still in the old way, the way a hunted animal goes still when it has been seen. It's him. Yes. How did he find me? That was the question I had been afraid she would ask. I had answered it for myself 100 times in the past 3 weeks. I gave her the truth. Mira. The fortress is on the southern edge of my territory. Anyone who passes through these mountains, anyone, sends word back down to whoever is paying for it. You have been here almost 2 months. I sent men, the day after the balcony, down through the lower towns to ask what was being asked about you. There were 3 men in 3 different inns, asking about a widow with a small dark-haired boy. They were not subtle. You knew. I knew enough. I did not know he would bring an army. She was silent. The wind moved her hair. Why an army? She said, very low. Why not a single man with a knife in the night? Why all of this? I did not have a clean answer. I had pieces of one. I gave her the pieces. He has been hunting you a long time. You ran from him publicly the first time, and the village believed you over his cousin. He lost face. Then he lost the girl in the 3rd town, the one who looked like you. That was a story that travelled. Men laughed at him in the lower river country for a season. A man like him does not forgive being laughed at. And I stopped. I considered. I told her the worst piece. There is a rumour about you. I do not know if it is true. The men in the inns were saying that the widow he was looking for had wolf blood, that her son had wolf blood, that whoever held her would hold a bloodline. Her face went still. I do not have wolf blood, Garrick. I know. Finian does not have wolf blood. I know. Then why? Because rumour does not need to be true to move men. He will have started the rumour himself, or his people will have. It gives his army a reason to march. It gives his bannerman something to want. He is not coming here to take a widow. He is coming here to take a prize. He has dressed the thing up large enough that he cannot lose face if he wins it. That is what men like him do. I made myself stop. I made myself look at her properly. He will not have you, I said. He will not have the boy, not while I am breathing. Do you hear me? She nodded. Her throat worked. Do you believe me? Yes. Good. I bent. I kissed her forehead. Quick, hard, once. Now go down, I said. Take Finian to the inner keep. Stay there until I come for you. She went. I watched her go all the way down the wall stairs before I turned back to Selwyn. He had been standing 2 paces away the whole time, the way Selwyn always did, looking at nothing in particular. He looked at me now. How many men can he field in earnest? I asked. 4 to 1 against us, maybe 5, with siege engines. Time! 3 weeks before the snow comes down. He knows that as well as we do. And the moon. Selwyn was quiet for a moment. My lord, he said at last, in 3 nights, and she will rise red. I had known. I had counted in my head all morning. I had known. I gripped the cold stone of the parapet. A blood moon is a bad night to fight a battle. A blood moon is the worst night to fight a battle. When one of the men on the field is a wolf who has not let himself off the leash in 9 years. The wolf in me, on a blood moon, would not be a tool. The wolf in me, on a blood moon, would be a fire I would need to ride. I did not know if I could ride it. I did not know if I could ride it without losing more than 3 men this time. I looked down at the army on the slope. I looked at the small herald galloping up from the lower road with a brass horn in one hand. I knew, before he opened his mouth, what the demand would be. The fortress to surrender. My lands to be yielded. The widow Mira and her son to be brought down before nightfall. I sent the herald away without an answer. Then I went down to find my son. Chapter 6. Garrick. I found Finian in the courtyard the next morning. He had come down with one of the kitchen girls to bring bread to the horses, which he had decided was now his job. The siege had been on for 1 full day. The mood in the fortress had begun to change. The captains had stopped speaking when I walked into a room. The kitchens had begun rationing, and the women near the eastern wall had begun, quietly, to gather their children closer when they passed open windows. The boy did not seem to know any of this, or, if he knew, he had decided that the horses still needed bread. He saw me. He came over with great seriousness, holding the empty cloth that had wrapped the loaves. My lord. Captain Finian. I had been calling him that since the previous night, when the war meeting had run late, and I had come back to our chambers and found him still awake in our bed, waiting up for me with his small face very serious. He had asked me 3 questions in a row about how a wall was held. I had answered all 3. He had nodded very gravely after each one and said, Good. When I had finally said that we could not talk about it any more until the morning, he had said, with the dignity of a small general, All right, but if I am to help, you should call me by a captain's name. I had called him Captain Finian since. Now he stood in the cold courtyard, with his small hands tucked into the front of his tunic for warmth, and he said, My lord, I want to tell you something about the moon. I set down the bridle I had been holding. I came around the horse, and I knelt, properly on one knee, in the cold dust of the courtyard, my great frame folding down so that my silver eyes were level with his. Tell me. He took a breath. He had practiced. I could see it in the way he held his small hands. I watch the moon every night, he said. Even the small ones, I count her. She gets a tiny bit bigger, and then a tiny bit smaller, and then she goes away, and then she comes back, and when she's the very biggest and her face is red, that's a special one. A red moon makes the wolves stronger. Yes, I said quietly, it does. All of them, not just the good ones, the mean ones too. I went very still. So if you fight when the moon is biggest and reddest, the bad wolves will be very angry and very strong, but you will be very strong too, and you are bigger than them, and you have more practice at being a wolf than they do, I think. So if you fight on the night when the moon is most red, you get to be the strongest wolf, and they don't surprise you, because you already knew it was coming. He paused. He frowned, working it out. And the bad ones, they don't always know how to use it. They just get angry. That's the difference. He spread his small hands as if to say, you see. I did not move. I have stood in war councils with grown men and listened to plans more complicated than that one. I have stood with grey-bearded captains and weighed the cost of a salient against the cost of a flank for a full afternoon, and I had not felt what I felt then, kneeling on the cold dust of my own courtyard, with a 5-year-old in front of me, whose mother had taught him to be quiet under windows in 3 different towns, and whose father was buried in a field he had never seen. I felt the wolf in me lift its head. I felt the wolf in me say, very clearly, in the place behind my eyes, "The boy is right." I had been trying, for 3 days, to plan a battle that the wolf in me would not need to come to. I had been trying to plan the blood moon out of the equation. I had been trying to win on the night before, or the night after, with the wall and with the men. The boy, in 2 minutes, had told me what every part of me already knew, and what no part of me had wanted to admit, that the only way to win this fight was to walk into the worst night and not be ashamed of what I had to bring with me. I took his small right hand in my huge one. Not the way a father pats a child, the way one warrior takes another's hand on a battlefield, slow and serious. "Captain Finian," I said softly, "you have given me a plan. I will use it." His eyes went round. "I am a captain. You are a captain. You have rank now in this fortress. Wait until Mamma hears." The corner of my mouth did the thing it now did all the time around him. "Yes," I said. "Wait until your mother hears."
Mira, the 2 days before the blood moon were the longest 2 days of my life. I worked. Elspeth and I worked. We made bandages. We rolled them and tied them and stacked them in the cupboards in the order Elspeth wanted them. We made fever tea, and we made the green paste for cuts that had begun to swell, and we made the bitter draught that would let a wounded man sleep through having a wound stitched. I kept my hands moving every hour I was awake. If I let my hands stop, I shook. I tried to keep Finian close. I tried, that is to say, and failed because my son had become a captain. He was running messages between the kitchens and the barracks now. Garrick had given him a sash, an old one cut down to the right size, and Finian wore it across his small chest with the seriousness of a man wearing the cloak of his order. The men of the garrison had taken to him. The red-haired guard at the inner gate saluted him. The cook in the kitchens called him captain without smiling, which is the highest honor a kitchen cook can pay a child. I should have been afraid. I was afraid. But I was also, in some small, still part of me I had not had access to in years, proud. On the second night, the night before the moon, Garrick came to find me late. He pulled me into a quiet alcove off the great hall, a small stone corner with an old tapestry on the wall and a single torch in a bracket, and almost no light. He did not say anything at first. He just looked at me in the half-dark, his silver eyes very tired and very steady on my face. Then he cupped my face with both his hands. "Mira, don't." I knew what he was going to say. I had known all afternoon, while I rolled bandages, while my hands shook just enough to fumble the knots, while I pretended to Elspeth that they were not shaking. "Don't, Garrick, please. If anything happens to me, don't. Listen." He pressed his forehead to mine. He spoke very low and very fast, as if he had been keeping the words in for a long time and was afraid of losing them. "If anything happens to me, Elspeth has a sealed letter. The fortress goes to my second cousin in the north. He is a good man. He will treat you and the boy as kin. There is gold in a chest under our bed. Take it. Take Finian. Go where you want. Do not stay in this place if I am not in it. Do you hear me? Garrick, promise me. Don't make me a plan for after." I had not meant for my voice to break. It broke. I felt the tears come up before I could stop them, and his thumbs moved on my cheekbones to catch them, and his silver eyes closed. "I do not want a plan for after," I whispered. "Come back to us, Garrick. That is the plan I want. Come back to your captain. Come back to me. Come back, and we will have all the after we need." He kissed me then. Not the slow, careful kiss of the balcony. Not the small, stolen kisses of the doorway and the corridor and the courtyard. This was a different thing. This was a man's mouth on a woman's mouth on the night before he meant to ride out under a blood moon, and there was no slowness in it. He kissed me deep, and he kissed me long, and one of his hands slid into my hair and tightened, and the other slid down my back and pulled me hard against him, and I felt every line of his body for the first time, and I made a small sound against his mouth, and he made a low, rough sound back, and the torch on the wall flickered, and the tapestry breathed against my shoulder, and the cold stone under my feet was very far away. When he broke the kiss, he did not let me go. He held me there against him, his rough cheek against mine, breathing hard. "You are mine, Mira." I had not given him permission to say that. I did not need to. "I am yours, and I will come back to you. Promise me, I promise. For you, for our boy." The words went through me like a small clean stone dropped into a deep pool. I nodded against him. I could not speak. He kissed me once more, gently this time. The kind of kiss that is also a mark. "Here, I have left a part of me here. Do not lose it for me while I am away." He pressed his lips to my forehead. He breathed me in. Then he stepped back. He did not look at me again. I understood that he could not. If he had looked at me again, he would not have been able to go. I stood in the alcove a long time after he was gone. Then I went up to the inner keep, where my son was waiting with Elspeth, and I took him into my arms and held him until the candles burned low. Chapter 7. The Blood Moon. Mira. The third night came, and the moon rose red. It came up slow over the eastern peaks, the way a thing that knows its own power does not need to hurry. It was huge that night. It was the color of old wine, the color of dark roses, the color of things that had been alive once, and had been alive a very long time ago. It washed the snow on the high mountains in a strange, soft pink. It washed the stones of the fortress in something deeper, something almost the color of a wound. Finian had asked to see. I had said no. I had said, "You should sleep, my star, please, please sleep." He had looked up at me with his very serious face, the face he wore now even when he was not trying to, and he had said, "Mama, he is going to fight for us. I have to watch." So I carried him to the high window of the inner keep. He was almost too big to carry, but I carried him anyway. He rested his small head against the side of my neck. He did not speak. His eyes were on the courtyard far below, where a tall figure in dark armor was mounting a great black horse. "There he is," he whispered. "Yes, my star. He looks brave. Yes, he is going to come back, Mama." I could not answer. I held him tighter and—
Garrick, I will tell you what it is to ride down a mountain road under a blood moon, and I will try to tell it true. The wolf in me did not come up the way I had thought it would. I had expected a flood. I had expected the thing in my blood to rise up like a river breaking a dam, the way it had risen the night of the poachers. Hot and fast and stupid, and after no memory at all. I had braced for that. I had told my men what to do if it took me. I had told Selwyn, and only Selwyn, to put a silver bolt in my chest if I turned on them. The wolf did not come up like that. The wolf came up the way a friend comes up. That is the strangest way I can put it. I have thought about it for the rest of my life since, and I cannot put it any better. The blood moon was full above me, and the red light was on my hands and on my horse's neck, and I could feel the thing in my blood rising. But it rose into my hands and into my eyes and into my shoulders, and it sat there. It did not push for the front. It waited. I think it had waited 9 years. I think I had waited 9 years. I think the boy on the courtyard stairs, with his small charcoal moon and his careful counting, had been right about a thing I had not been able to see, that the wolf in me had been lonely all this time, because I would not let it come into the same room as the man. On the blood moon it came in. We rode together. I led 60 men down the slope. We came out of the lower gate at the dead of night, and we hit the eastern flank of Draven's camp before the sentries had time to sound. The first line of his men broke under our charge. They had not expected us. They had been sleeping on full bellies. They had been told the Wolf Lord was not stupid enough to ride out on a blood moon. Some of them, the half-wolves among them, the ones Draven had bought from somewhere south, tried to shift. The blood moon pulled them too hard. They had no practice. They came at our line in mad, uncontrolled rushes that broke against the disciplined shield wall like waves on rock. I stayed at the front. I did the work. The wolf rode in my hands and my eyes and my shoulders, and I did not lose myself. Not once. I had a small voice in the back of my head all night, and the small voice sounded a great deal like a 5-year-old captain. And the small voice said, "Be the strongest one. Don't be the angriest one. We took losses. I will not pretend we did not. I have read enough songs about battles to know what a song will leave out. We lost 11 men in the first hour. Bren, my manservant, who had brought me water for 9 years, and who had insisted on coming down with us because he said a lord did not ride to a battle without his man, took a blade to the side at the 3rd tent, and bled out before Selwyn could get him to the back of the line. Selwyn himself took an axe to the shoulder near the captain's tent. He stayed up. He kept fighting. I have not, in all my years, served with a better man. There was a moment. I will not lie about this either. There was a moment near the 3rd hour of the fight when one of Draven's half-wolves came at me with a wide, ugly swing, and the swing took the line of my jaw, and I felt the silver in his blade, and the wolf in me went, for the first time that night, up. It tried to come up the old way, the hot way, the way that does not remember. I do not know what would have happened if I had let it. I do know what stopped it. I thought of Mira's face against the tapestry in the alcove. I thought of the way she had said, "Come back to your captain." I thought of a small bare-footed boy on a tower stair saying, "Your wolf looks lonely." I held the wolf in me with both hands. I said to it, "Not yet, not for him. Save it for the right one." It listened. I found Lord Draven near the back of the camp, in his white tent, with his thin face gone the colour of paper. He had not expected to be fighting. He had expected to be receiving. His sword was in his hand, but his hand was wrong. His armour was already streaked with the blood of better men who had died standing in front of him. He raised the sword. He shouted something. The words did not matter. I did not answer. I came in low and fast. The black horse sidestepped at exactly the right moment. My sword went in once, came out, and Draven was on the ground. The white horse bolted into the dark. It was over very quickly after that. The men of his army who could still run, ran. The ones who could not, surrendered. I sat on my horse in the middle of the broken camp, with the red moon directly over my head, and I was bleeding from 2 places and breathing hard, and the wolf in me was sitting quietly at the back of my mind, the way a friend sits when the day's work is done. I turned the black horse back toward the fortress. I had a promise to keep.
Chapter 8. The Asking. Mira, I saw him coming from the high window. I saw the line of riders winding back up the mountain road. I saw the dark figure at the front. I saw, even at that distance, the way he sat on his horse, tired but upright, alive. I made a sound that was not quite a word. Finian smiled into my neck. "I told you, Mama." "Yes, my star. I told you he would come back. You did." I set him down. I ran. I did not care that my dress was the work dress and not the blue one, that my hair had come loose from the braid and was halfway down my back, that the corridors of the inner keep were full of healers and frightened serving girls and soldiers' wives all spilling out of doorways to ask what was happening. I ran past all of them. Finian ran behind me, his small bare feet slapping the stones. I came out into the courtyard just as the gates were opening. He rode in. The courtyard was full of torchlight and the dying red light of the moon and the noise of horses and tired men. Garrick rode through it slowly. His cloak was dark with blood, some his, most not. His face was streaked with dirt. There was a long cut down one arm, and another along the line of his jaw where I had once kissed him, and his silver eyes, even in the red torchlight, were the eyes of a man all the way through. There was no other color underneath. He saw me at once. He stopped the horse. He swung down. He almost stumbled, caught himself on the saddle, straightened. And then he walked across the courtyard toward me with the slow, careful steps of a man who had used everything he had and had a little left only for this. I did not run to him. I had a feeling, watching him come, that he wanted to do something first. He stopped in front of me. He looked at me a long moment. Then he looked down at the small boy holding my hand. He went to one knee. He did it slowly. The armor creaked. He had to brace one bloody hand on the stones. But he went all the way down, and he was on one knee in front of Finian, and he was, almost, at eye level with him. The courtyard went quiet. The men nearest us stopped what they were doing. Even the horses settled. Garrick reached out. He took Finian's small hand in his huge one, the way he had in the courtyard before the battle. He held it gently. "Captain Finian," he said. His voice was rough from shouting and from the long ride home. "Your plan worked. I knew it would." A small, tired smile crossed his mouth. "I should have listened to you sooner. It's all right. Little one, I want to ask you something." "Okay." Garrick took a breath. "I want to be your father," he said, "if you will let me. I know I am not the one who came before. I will not try to be, but I will be the one who is here now. I will read to you when you cannot sleep. I will teach you to ride. I will sit with you when the moon is small and when the moon is big. I will love your mother every day of the rest of my life. And I will be your father, Finian, if you will have me." Finian's small face did the most extraordinary thing. It went very still in the way it always did when he was thinking carefully. His small mouth pressed together. His eyes searched the Lord's face all the way over it, every line of it. The cut on the jaw, the dirt, the silver eyes, the careful waiting. Then it broke open into the biggest, brightest smile I have ever seen on my son. He threw his small arms around Garrick's neck. "Yes," he said. "Yes, yes, yes. But you have to give Mama kisses every night the moon is pretty. That's the rule." A laugh came out of Garrick. A real one. Tired and surprised and warm, he wrapped his great arms around the boy and held him for a long moment, and his silver eyes closed, and I saw a single clean line cut through the dirt on his cheek where a tear had gone down. "Every pretty moon," he said into the boy's hair. "I promise." He stood. He did not let go of Finian. He lifted the boy easily onto one arm, the one that was not bleeding, and turned to me. I had been crying without realizing it. My face was wet. I did not care. Garrick looked at me over the top of my son's head. His silver eyes were soft and tired and very full. "And you, Mira." He stopped. He had to stop. He cleared his throat. "For most of my life," he said quietly, "I believed I was made to be alone. I believed it was the price. I believed the only kind thing I could do for the world was to keep my distance from it. And then a small boy left a cup of tea outside my door. And then his mother thanked me for an herb. And then," his voice caught, "everything I thought was true about my life turned out to be wrong." He took a step closer. Finian sat patiently in the curve of his arm, watching us both with his small, wise face. "Will you be my Luna?" Garrick asked. "Will you be my heart? Will you marry me, Mira, and let me come home to you for the rest of my days?" I did not even try to speak. I nodded. I nodded so hard that tears flew off my cheeks. "Yes," I finally managed. "Yes, Garrick, with all my heart, yes." He bent his head to me. He kissed me there in the middle of the courtyard, with the red moon slowly fading to its old silver above us, with my son on his arm, with 60 tired men watching and not minding at all. He kissed me deeply, the kind of kiss that has been promised through a long night, the kind of kiss that ends a story and begins a different one. He kissed me as if his mouth had been waiting all his life to find mine, and I kissed him back as if mine had too. And the wind moved softly through the open gates behind us. When we broke apart, Finian was clapping his small hands together with great seriousness. "The moon is happy," he announced. Garrick laughed. He bent and kissed the top of his son's head. He kept his other arm tight around me. "Yes, Captain," he said. "I think she is." Gentlest week the fortress had known in living memory. The wounded healed. The dead were buried with care, on a soft gray morning, with old Elspeth saying the words because she knew them best and Garrick standing bareheaded in the wind with one hand on the shoulder of Bren's young brother. The remains of Draven's army were sent back down the mountain unarmed, with food enough for the road and a clear message from the Lord of Shadowpine that he did not wish to see them again. The gates were repaired. The walls were swept. The kitchens began baking honey cakes again, because someone had remembered that there was now a small boy in the keep who was very fond of them, and that he had recently helped to win a battle. Selwyn's shoulder healed slowly. He would never lift his right arm above his head again. He bore it with the calm of a man who had decided long ago that he was lucky to be on this side of the ground at all. Finian visited him every day in the healing hall and made him laugh, the deep, slow laugh of a tired old soldier. And once I came in and found Selwyn teaching my son to fold a square of linen into the shape of a little wolf, his blunt, scarred fingers patient with the small, pale ones. I moved the rest of my things into the tower. I did not move them all at once. Garrick had said, very seriously, take whatever time you need, and I had taken him at his word. By the end of that week, the tower had my clothes in it and my comb on the table and my husband's small wooden bird on the windowsill and Finian's pebble collection on the shelf and a wooden sword the smith had made for our son leaning in the corner. The candle in the high window burned every night now. The fortress was warm.
Garrick, on the 7th evening after the battle, the three of us stood together on the high tower balcony. The moon was silver again. A soft, calm, ordinary silver. She hung in the eastern sky just above the dark line of the peaks, and her light fell over the mountains and over the stones of the fortress, and over the small bright family standing on the highest balcony of all. I had one arm around Mira's waist. My other hand rested gently on Finian's shoulder. The boy was leaning against my hip. He had fallen quiet, the way he sometimes did when there were too many beautiful things to look at, and he had to take them in slowly, one at a time. I once thought, I said quietly, that the curse made me unworthy of love. Mira turned her head against my chest. I thought I was meant to live in this tower until I died in it. I thought the kindest thing I could do for the world was to disappear into it. I had made that peace, a long time ago. I had lived inside it for years. Garrick. And then this little star boy proved me wrong. Finian smiled up at us both. The moonlight caught in his hair. He looked for a moment almost too beautiful to be a real child. The moon knew, he said simply. She knew you two belonged together. I just helped a little. Mira laughed. It was a soft laugh, full of warmth, and a little bit full of tears. She leaned her head against my chest. I pressed my lips to the top of her head, and then, after a moment, I tilted her chin up gently with one finger and kissed her, softly, slowly, on the mouth. The kind of kiss that did not need to be hurried because there were so many more of them coming. When I pulled back, she stayed against me. I held her there. I was quiet for a long time, looking out over the mountains. When I finally spoke again, my voice was very low. I was not speaking only to her. I was speaking perhaps to myself, to the night, to the silver wolf inside me that had finally lain down to rest as a friend. I am so afraid, I said, of losing this. Mira did not move. I have only just learned how to have it, I went on softly. I do not know all the small ways yet. I do not know what it is to wake up next to someone every morning, or to hear a child laugh in the next room, or to come home from a hard day and have a hand reach for mine in the dark. I am learning. I want to learn, but I am afraid, Mira. I am afraid I will turn around one day and find it gone. She lifted her hand. She placed it over mine where it rested on her waist. That is what loving something feels like, she said quietly. I know it. I have it too. The fear does not mean the love is wrong. It means the love is real. I closed my eyes. I breathed her in. The pine and the smoke from the fires below, and the faint sweetness of the honey cake she had eaten with Finian after supper. I breathed all of it in, and I kept my eyes closed a moment longer. And when I opened them again, the silver in the air was soft. Then I will be afraid, I said. And I will love you anyway. Yes, every day. Yes, every pretty moon. She smiled into my tunic. Every pretty moon, Garrick. Below us, somewhere down in the courtyard, a single voice began to sing. It was one of the older guards. He had a sweet, rough voice. He was singing a song that was very old in these mountains, the kind of song that did not need an audience. He was just singing it because the night was clear, and the war was over, and his lord was alive, and the world had gotten a little kinder than it had been a week before. Finian listened a moment. Then he tugged gently on my sleeve. Father. It was the first time he had said it. I looked down. Whatever was in my face when I did, Mira would carry the memory of it inside her for the rest of her life. "Yes, son," I said, my voice barely held. "I think the moon wants to hear a story tonight." "Does she?" "Yes. The one about the wolf and the lady and the boy, the one I told you, remember?" "I remember." You tell it better." I let out a small breath. I shifted Mira gently against my side. I lifted Finian up onto the wide stone of the balcony's inner wall, and I sat down beside him, and I kept one strong arm around him so he would not fall. I drew Mira down beside us. The three of us sat together with the silver moon ahead, and the lit windows of the fortress warm at our backs. "Once upon a time," I began softly, "in a high stone tower at the top of a mountain, there lived a wolf who thought he would be alone forever." "A sad wolf," Finian whispered. "A very sad wolf. He had silver eyes, and he had a quiet name, and he had a curse that he had carried for a long time. He sat at his window every night and watched the moon, and he thought she was the only friend he was ever going to have. But he was wrong. He was wrong." My arm tightened gently around the boy, because one day, on a misty morning down in a mountain pass, he met a brave widow with grey eyes, and a small star boy who was not afraid of anything. And the small star boy started leaving him gifts at his door. A cup of tea, a drawing of the moon, a piece of lavender because it smelled nice when he was sad, and one by one the gifts found a small crack in the wolf's old quiet heart, and they slipped inside, and they grew there until the heart was not quiet anymore. It was singing. Mira was crying again. She did not bother to hide it. I reached across and brushed her cheek with my thumb and kept telling the story. "And the wolf came down from his tower, and he learned how to walk under the moon with the widow, and he learned how to laugh again, in the small hall at supper. And one day there was a battle, and the wolf rode out under a red moon, and he won, because the small star boy had told him exactly when to fight. And when the battle was done, he came home to his widow and his boy, and he asked them, very, very politely, if he could be their family." "And what did they say?" Finian asked, even though he knew. "They said yes. And then, I said softly, the wolf was not lonely anymore, and the widow was not running anymore, and the small star boy had a father who would always, always come home to him. And up on the tower, every night when the moon rose pretty, the three of them stood together and watched her come up over the mountains. And the wolf had peace. He had at last, after all his long years, found peace." Finian was quiet. The song from the courtyard had ended. The wind had softened. The moon had climbed a little higher and turned a little whiter. We sat in the silver light, and no one moved and no one spoke. After a long time, Finian reached up. He took one of my huge hands in his small one, and he took one of Mira's hands in his other, and he linked the three of us together in his lap, like a small living chain. "This is the best part," he said sleepily. "Which part, my star?" Mira whispered. "The part after the story ends, the quiet part, when everyone is just home." He leaned his small head against my arm. His eyes began to close. I, who had once thought myself the loneliest creature in these mountains, who had once sat at this same balcony with no one beside me, who had made my peace with the dark long ago. I bent down and pressed a kiss to the soft hair of the boy who had taught me to want light again. Then I turned to the woman beside me. I did not say anything. I did not need to. I lifted her hand to my lips and held it there, my eyes closed, breathing. She rested her head on my shoulder. Above us the silver moon rose higher into a clear sky, and she was kind, and she was old, and she had seen many things in her long life. And she watched over the small, bright family on the high stone balcony with the soft attention of an old friend. She did not hurry. She did not have to. There would be many more nights like this one, in the high tower of Shadowpine. There would be honey cakes in the morning, and small wooden swords in the courtyard, and pebbles in the chest at the foot of a child's bed, and the sound of a deep voice reading stories until small eyes closed, and a hand reaching for another hand in the dark. There would be ordinary days, so many of them. And the wolf, and the widow, and the small star boy who had loved them both into being a family, We would have all of them. Every one. The end.